How's your day,
We
Vic?
just, we, my day has been extremely wonderful, extremely warm, but that's okay. I am just delighted to have you to talk to for a few minutes about Carl Sherman and the other Texas Democrats going to Washington, D.C. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I'm just delighted you're here to talk to us. And we will do an email blast, and several thousand people are waiting to hear what you have to say. So where do we start? Let's start with breaking the quorum.
Okay. Well, first, I want to just thank you for having me on to discuss where we stand and why, was it necessary that we break the quorum. It really, Esther Davis, it was about protecting the freedom to vote. It was about really the bill was going to pass despite the fact that over 400 Texans came and testified, the majority against the bill. So this really was to protect the freedom to vote for millions of Texans. We had to take bold action by leaving the state to deny Republicans a quorum on HB 3, which in essence a voter suppression bill. And we basically have a suppression special session. Out of all the reasons the governor could have called a special session, he could have called a special session about the grid and the over 700 people who died. But no, he called a special session to introduce this voter suppression bill. And the Texas House Democrats are now taking the fight to our nation's capital. And we live on borrowed time in Texas, and Congress has to act now to pass sweeping federal voter protection legislation. And all these anti-voter bills are just pandering to Trump's big lie, and Republican leaders need to really stand up and have courage to tell the truth.
Absolutely. So what is today's message? I know how long have you been there? And let's start with what's happening today. What's happening right now?
Well, this is week 3 that began today, and each day we are gaining more momentum with more legislators as we are talking with U.S. senators and U.S. Congress congressional representatives, and we're finding allies here at the nation's capital, and we will continue to do that. We had very productive 2 meetings with Senator Manchin, and I'm encouraged by the takeaways from that meeting and others, but we'll continue to do that. We're also talking with various freedom fighters, such as former President Lyndon B. Johnson's daughter, who will be joining us this week. And we've had other legislators and former legislators like Andrew Young. Ambassador Young has also lent his support to us. Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King, has met with us, and the Donna Brazil, and the list is long of individuals.
And I understand the Vice President has been down to speak with you.
Absolutely. The Vice President welcomed us to the citadel of our democracy when we got here the first day. And so Vice President Kamala Harris has just been wonderful and a staunch supporter of our efforts.
I know the regular session in Texas was underway, but it has been stalled at the moment. Which one of the current bills in Texas was one that you were predominantly working on or expected to get passed during this session?
Well, we had several bills passed that I authored. One that I'm most proud of was Bo's Law, which is a bill that is focused on police reform. That bill passed out of the House and the Senate unanimously out of the Senate, and the governor signed it into law. And the bill simply says that we will have systemic accountability in law enforcement by requiring that police officers must activate their body cam upon an investigation, and that they cannot turn their body cam off during the middle of an investigation. So that and other bills we were really excited about passing. And I also made some strides in criminal justice reform in our penal system. For many years, we have
Yeah.
had a huge problem with oversight there. And being the former mayor of the first city to ever have body cams for our police officers, I know the difference that body cams make. And I was able to get a rider in unfortunately, I applied for $25 million, but at the end of the day, we got $1.5 million for body cams to go inside of our prison systems for our correctional officers, because there are many, if you look at what's happened in policing with incidents like George Floyd and others, that the story is more bleak inside of our prison system. So we will now begin to roll out with body cams in our prison systems, and that's something that I, push for quietly, and I'm determined that here, while at the nation's capital, I've already reached out to Congressman Castro, and he has agreed to help me on that. I need $23.5 million more from the federal government to ensure that our loved ones and our citizens that are incarcerated in our prison system, which is approximately 130,000 Texans that are locked up in our prisons, have oversight and have the ability to appeal if there's abuse inside of our prison system.
Now, you mentioned a key word I had not heard before. You mentioned that was a rider on the body cam. So would the rider
Yes.
be the additional prison system, and it would be part of the body cam movement?
Well, the rider is a fiscal term that we use in appropriations. I'm one of the appropriators for the state of Texas to provide the $250 billion budget. And it's a term that appropriators use, and one of the benefits or privileges you have as a member of appropriations is that you get a chance, since you're working on the budget, you get a chance to put in riders that usually if the appropriator puts it in, it's going to be approved. But certainly it takes coordination and relationships with other appropriators too on that committee.
Wow. Well, I have to ask you about, before we go any further, because we put out a message earlier about my conversation with Carl Sherman in Washington, D.C., and give us a little bit of information on the Texas Retired Teachers Association as it relates to this session that you're in right now.
That's a very important question to me. Esther Davis, during this session and the last regular session, the 13th check for our teachers was something that I co-authored, and it's relating to a one-time supplemental payment of benefits under the teacher retirement system of Texas. This is very important because this bill allows our retired heroes, a.k.a. our teachers, to receive an additional 13th check up to $2,400 through the teacher retirement system of Texas. So we filed this session several bills to get through the session, and there was no reason for those bills not to be heard on the floor. Unfortunately, there are those who are playing politics, and on July 14th of this year, a press conference was held by my colleagues and friends on the other side of the aisle, and where they talked on this subject, wherein they blamed it on the Democrats for stalling the bill that they have now. But there was no reason that that bill should not have passed. In addition to that, we also co-authored a cost of living adjustment, which the Republican body has not been supportive of. Our teachers have been crying for a COLA for some time. We know the cost of living continues to go up. And so that's why it was important that we filed multiple bills related to this issue. HB 3214 was one of those, which was a cost of living adjustment bill, and the bill did not make it to the House floor for a vote because it was held up in committee. And as you know, the retired teachers need this COLA, this cost of living adjustment, and it has been now I think since 2013 when the last one provided for our members who retired before 2004. So for everyone else, no COLA was granted, meaning members who have been retired for 17 years now have yet to benefit from an adjustment. And that's just shameless. It's, in my opinion, it is not responsible for taking care of our retired teachers. And they've given their life to teach the next generation, and we should back them up.
My conversation is with the Honorable State Representative, Texas State Representative Carl Sherman. And I have to mention, while we're having this wonderful update on what's going on in Washington, if you want to contribute, we're going to ask all of you, some of you, please, you can donate to Freedom to Vote Texas.com. That's Freedom to Vote Texas.com. And this is Esther Davis. I will have it on the email for you so that you can feel free to send them a donation while they're there. I am going to take a little bit of a break, and Representative Sherman, I'm going to ask you to just stay where you are. I'm really going to count to about 10, so I can just say thank you to the people that are supporting you financially for this conference call. So just hold tight for a second. It's Esther Davis. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
The average viewer probably doesn't even know what I'm holding in my hand, but what we're looking at right now are the last 100 written pages of Napoleon Hill. From his typewriter to my study, Napoleon Hill was certainly ahead of his time. November 3rd, 1986, I met W. Clement Stone, and he offered me the opportunity to finish, complete, and update Napoleon Hill's last written work. It all goes back to a conversation that I had years ago with Ambassador Andy Young. Here is an individual who walked side by side with Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, me and Dr. King, we integrated the lunch counter, but we failed to integrate the dollar. And I said, Mr. Ambassador, how does anybody integrate the dollar? And he says, well, somebody has got to give us the keys, the qualities on how to compete effectively in a capitalistic society. Hopefully, this will be the manual on just how to do that.
And we're back with a grand conversation, a Texas-sized conversation with the Honorable Texas State Representative Carl Sherman. We've talked about a couple of things that are important to your constituency right now, but I want to ask about the bail reform, because I know there is some rules getting ready to go into law, or where do we really stand on the bail reform? And then we'll get back to Washington.
Well, you can call it bail reform, but it's not bail reform. It's disingenuous for this to be called bail reform. It's almost like referring to criminal justice reform, something that enacts provisions that criminalizes survival. Bail reform relating to the rules for setting the amount of bail to the release of certain defendants on a monetary bond or personal bond, the related duties of certain officers taking bail bonds and of a magistrate in a criminal case to a charitable bail organization. Now, I know that sounds very convoluted, and we could have just taken the route of several other states that have actually enacted bail reform. Bail reform should be a system in which individuals are not advantaged because they have the means to be able to post bail. Currently, with our system, it does make it difficult for the marginalized in our society, and this is not bail reform. On tomorrow, we're going to be looking more at the provisions in this bill, and we hope to offer some legislative solutions and amendments to the current bail reform bill that's been proposed.
Excellent, excellent. Tell me, what support have you gotten from the faith leaders in Texas, the black churches? And I need to tell you now that the National Council of Negro Women are joining me in the vote for Texas and in getting people to take the vaccine in Texas. So they're listening and they're waiting for this grand email to go out. But what support are you getting from the Black Caucus, the faith leaders, from the other institutions in Texas?
Well, I got to tell you, that is one of the most exciting things about what we're doing here, the response that we've received from the faith-based community, from the various legislative black caucuses across the nation, the D.C. area Baptist Church Association of Pastors have welcomed us. Immediately when we got here, they reached out to us and have been supporting us with resources, financial resources, and I am just excited about Pastor McNeil and Pastor Miller and several others, Pastor Jerry Jones, who have stood up for us, not just in prayer, but in financial contributions as well. Each of these church pastors have individually and independently committed, pledged, and given to Texas Legislative Black Caucus in our efforts here. They even provided us dinner one evening and lunch on another day. Today, in fact, where we held a press conference, a very important press conference, where there was a clarion call that was sent out throughout the nation asking all churches of all denominations and non-denominations to join in, Christian and Muslim, to help us stop these Jim Crow laws so that we can have the freedom to vote. And so they have been very supportive, as well as the clarion call was made to ask our Greek sororities and fraternities to also get engaged and get involved with this, because this is our moment right now, unfortunately, that we must stand to defend and protect our voting rights in America.
What do you foresee as how do we go forward? Now, I know this special session began July 8th. It can last up to 30 days. Am I correct about that?
That's correct.
Okay, but there are currently about 288 bills filed in the House and 72 bills filed in the Senate. Where are we going with this? Are we going to get through any of these paramount issues, in
You
your
know,
opinion?
well, it's really up to the governor. He put us in this predicament, and I believe that the resolve of the Democrat caucus is strong, and our intent is to ensure that these draconian bills do not pass. And as it relates to Article 10, that was an article in appropriations that the governor vetoed. We passed the budget. On appropriations, we worked very diligently to ensure that we appropriated adequate resources for every agency and department, and the governor chose to select Article 10, which affects the pay and benefits of our staff, as well as other agencies and departments that state budget funds. So it's really Article 10 of the state budget also funds the nonpartisan agencies that are crucial for policy making, including the Legislative Reference Library, which conducts research for legislature. And this is important, along with the Legislative Budget Board, which develops the policy and budget recommendations. So we're sort of flying blind here. Come September 1st, if the governor does not take action to fix what he has decided to veto, should never practice extortion in politics. The legislative arm should be separate from the executive arm, and I think that we'll see what happens. I hope and pray that the decision will be made to fund Article 10, just as he found $250 million for a wall.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I have to ask you, what can the public do, Carl Sherman, to make things a lot better in this state? This is going to be a two-part question. I know you're going to be there to the very end. Do you have an anticipated date that you're going to come home, or are you just going to stay until some action is done?
Yeah, we are focused right now just to get us to the point of killing this bill, Esther Davis, while at the same time focusing on getting national legislation passed so that it will trump what's happening below the Dixie line. And so how can people help? They can help us by calling their U.S. representative and ask them to support the John Lewis Act. They can help by contacting two Keystone members, which are, of course, everyone's seen in the news, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. And I can give you his number. It's 202.
I have his number. We'll put it up. No, we'll put it up for you.
Okay, great. And then Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema. Those individuals are very key in us passing legislation. And any opportunities to share social media from the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, Texas House Democratic Caucus, or the Texas Democratic Caucus, and then, of course, myself, Carl O. Sherman, TX. That's TX on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
I think we've covered an awful lot of ground. I cannot tell you how important this is, that we talk to you or talk to people that are there in the middle of the action that is going on. And I hope to talk to you again. Basically, we are going to blast you all over the state of Texas and beyond. And if I can set up a second appointment with you later on through your office, I'd be happy to do that, because it's just that important. You had a statement about democracy, and I just want you to express that in our final couple of minutes here. The freedom vote is the bedrock of our democracy. Texas must have free and fair access to the ballot box so that they can elect candidates that will pass life-saving legislation at the first opportunity. and not hold good policy hostage as a bargaining chip. What are your thoughts when I read that to you?
It rings true, Esther Davis. We are at a critical juncture in our democracy, and we must answer the call to ensure that all voters can participate in our democracy. We must move forward in ensuring that we expand the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 15th Amendment. In this state of Texas, we've done everything we could to expand the Second Amendment, and yet we have reduced the liberties of those who want to participate in our elections. Time is now. We've got to bury the Confederate spirit of this nation, and we've got to resurrect the spirit of John Lewis so that individuals can vote. Let me give you one example of a dangerous provision in the bill if it passes into law, and that is this. Those that are disabled, and they get it, and their parents get it, and their loved ones get it, because I receive the calls from individuals thanking us for fighting for them. Right now, if a disabled individual votes, and many vote, and they have a stamp for their signature, well, if this bill passes, it would be codified into law that you must have an ink signature. Many individuals, advocates for the disabled, came and protest and spoke against the bill, expressing that they would no longer be able to vote if they were not allowed to use their stamp anymore. Many of these individuals don't have fingers or hands, and yet this bill would block them out of participating in our democracy. That shouldn't be in this country. And so that's why we're fighting hard, because this will ensure that everyone has the freedom to participate in our democracy. It's too important for us to just not bring this to the citadel of our democracy and demand that Congress move on this to ensure that we have universal standards of voting throughout this nation.
My guest has been the Honorable Carl Sherman Sr. from the great state of Texas. He's a Texas state representative. It has been my pleasure and my esteemed honor to have you tell us what is in your heart and to continue to fight these Jim Crow laws that are confronting us today. Thank you so much, Mr. Sherman. I look forward to talking to you really soon.
Esther Davis, thank you so much for all that you do to inform the public. We are very, very blessed to have you.
This is Esther Davis. I will be right back to talk to our sponsors, and don't go away.
The average viewer probably doesn't even know what I'm holding in my hand, or what we're looking at right now with the last 100 written pages of Napoleon Hill. From his typewriter to my study, Napoleon Hill was certainly ahead of his time. November 3rd, 1986, I met W. Clement Stone, and he offered me the opportunity to finish, complete, and update Napoleon Hill's last written work. It all goes back to a conversation that I had years ago with Ambassador Andy Young. Here's an individual who walked side by side with Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, me and Dr. King, we integrated the lunch counter, but we failed to integrate the dollar. And I said, Mr. Ambassador, how does anybody integrate the dollar? And he says, well, somebody has got to give us the keys, the qualities on how to compete effectively in a capitalistic society. Hopefully, this will be the manual on just how to do that.